Hello and welcome. My name is Marche Iverson. I'm the Managing Director of the Mental Health and Addiction Recovery team here at MusiCares. I'm so glad that you could join us today for what promises to be an insightful and empowering session. Today's webinar is titled Money, Mindset, and Meaningful Relationships, a topic that sits at the intersection of two powerful forces in our lives. We often talk about mental wellness, financial stability separately, but today we'll explore how deeply connected they really are. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Shatavia Thomas, a licensed marriage and family therapist, a sought-after consultant, and the owner of Dr. Shay Speaks, LLC. As an expert, she brings powerful insight into how emotional well-being and financial habits are deeply connected. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Shay.
Thank you, thank you. Money is an emotional topic, and it's not just about the finances. Financial stress is a leading cause of anxiety and conflict, and stress and anxiety is huge in terms of hindering creativity, particularly in this industry, creative freedom and flow. And so today we're going to put some of these pieces together in terms of psychology, mental health, relationship, and finances. First, I want to start with summarizing an insightful survey completed by MusiCares in 2024. And I won't read all of the statistics, but as you can see from the slide, there is a wealth of information here regarding the implications of financial stress in terms of income insecurity, in terms of health and wellness, and also in terms of mental health, in terms of stress and anxiety. So it's very important to kind of think through how these impact the industry and what can be done to address some of the concerns. To highlight some of the key points, financial security is a major hurdle, and that's due to income instability, which becomes a burden. And not only it impacts people individually, but also in their professional and personal relationships. Financial strain, as I alluded to earlier, also prevents people from getting the necessary medical care that they need. And that includes things from colonoscopy screenings, vision, auditory screenings. And we all know how important vision and hearing is for the industry, let alone the individual health and well-being of the professional. And so in sum, financial strain negatively impacts mental health and relationships. And these key insights have implications not only in terms of the resources that are needed, but the kind of information and behavioral strategies that people can undertake to look towards improvement. So let's talk about the money. A sampling of musicians revealed a wide variety of information. It's easy to focus on the big name artists and assumptions around wealth and what the finances that the person has accumulated, but the wide range of professions show that not only for the actual performing artists, but also for other artists, there is a wide variety of income. And so the median hourly wage for musicians and singers, according to a U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics survey in 2023, shows about $39 an hour. The average salary for sound technician, $46,000 annually. Hourly wage for DJ, less than $30 an hour. A little bit more than $20 an hour for orchestra musicians. And the hourly wage, again, kind of ranges between $20 and $30 for these professions. So it is important to think about the implications of that in terms of lifestyle, and also as we talked about stress and anxiety. So now I want to invite you to put your creative hat on, but also to do some reflection about messages that you have received. What kinds of memories come to mind when you think of your money mantra or affirmation or message? And so sometimes that comes from things that we have been told by our family and our upbringing. Sometimes, again, pertinent to the industry, it's things that appear in song lyrics. And so I have examples here. You know, if you are of the more anxious or stressful impression related to money, you might believe that money doesn't grow on trees. You might believe that money ruins relationships. You might believe the love of money is the root of all evil. And if you have more of a spiritual frame of reference, you may think that it is better to give than receive. Where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And if you think about some song lyrics, I'm sure we can think of things like more money, more problems, another day, another dollar. If you've got the money, I've got the time. And so think about the reality that these lyrics are based on. These are people's lived experiences. And so, as we know in therapy, the story that we tell ourselves about our lives and the things that we believe have implications for how we live our life. And it starts early. Childhood experiences are huge when it comes to shaping both our mindset and relationship with money. So whether you grew up in abundance, right, a household where money was plentiful, or where you grew up where things were tight, it's important to think about how your early environment and also past relationships teach you consciously and unconsciously what money means, how to handle money, and what you believe you are allowed to have and allowed to spend. Financial instability as the result of the survey is huge. And so, for instance, if you came up in an environment where there were financial traumas, such as poverty or excessive debt or even financial abuse, that is going to weigh on you heavily and impact your thoughts, behaviors, and decisions. If you grew up in an environment where money was plentiful, you may have a different mindset around either tracking that money closely or spending because kind of easy come, easy go. On the opposite end, if you grew up in an environment where there was an abundance, you can have some of those same rules embedded as well. So one versus the other doesn't necessarily equate to good decisions or bad decisions. It depends on the context and how it manifests in your relationships. Another thing pertinent to the world of psychology is attachment style. Now, we all know about attachment in terms of your freedom and flexibility to experience the world, but let's think about it in the sense of finances. If you grew up and you have a secure attachment to money, then you may be relatively stress-free as it relates to finances. You may have behaviors like healthy budgeting. You may save and spend responsibly. And in your relationships, you may be very comfortable having open communication about finances, willing to compromise, things of that nature. If you have an anxious attachment to money, you may very well be insecure related to your sense of self-worth, related to your income or finances. You may feel that your security is threatened. And behaviors can include anything from overspending to impress people or to please others, to kind of hoarding money out of fear of depletion or abandonment. And in your relationships, you may seek reassurance through shared financial decisions, or you may use money to buy love or attention. Avoidant attachment is next. If you have an avoidant relationship with money, then there's an energy around independence and control. There's a discomfort and a privacy around finances, and there may even be a shame related to it and intense anxiety. You may compulsively spend, you may compulsively save, you may be fearful or reluctant to joint accounts due to trust issues. You may avoid financial interdependence in your relationships with your family or your romantic powers, or you might see money as a way to maintain distance. And so it is very important to ponder how attachment style factors in. There is a fourth style, not only in psychology, but as it relates to finances as well. And so if you have more of a disorganized orientation or attachment towards money, again, you can go from one extreme to the next. You may view money as a sense of security, or you may view money as being attached to a sense of danger. And so your spending may fluctuate, and you also may have emotional highs and lows related to finances. So continuing on related to the energy around money, does your energy involve longing for money, chasing money, flaunting money, stashing money away, clinging to money, or watching your money incessantly in hopes that you are able to sustain yourself and grow? Very important to think about. In premarital counseling, we talk about finances as a huge way to prepare couples for sharing a life together. And so, from the premarital research, there is a theory that money has four meanings. The meaning of money, rather, can fall into four categories. So, some people orient themselves to money as a sense of security. You think about safety, you think about covering basic needs, you think about saving for a rainy day. Some people see money as a symbol of status. And so that has to do with public persona, your image, or your access. Some people see money as a source of enjoyment. They spend on entertainment and leisure. They have the notion to reward themselves, right? Work hard, play hard, and reap the benefits of what you've sown in your life. And then lastly, unfortunately for some, money, the meaning of money is attached to a sense of control. And that can be relational power, societal power, and that's where some of those forms of abuse come in, related to financial insecurity and financial trauma. Continuing on in money and relationships, some of the cultural stereotypes in our society are very pervasive. In American society, we value wealth, right? The American dream is all about accumulating wealth, but there are some different meanings attached to that and different perspectives on that. We also sometimes assume that poverty is shameful and that maybe it results from being equated with laziness. And that's not always the case. In the same way that wealth is not always rightfully equated with intelligence or superiority. We also live in a hustle mentality society, right? We have a lot of thoughts and energy around that. And not only is it encouraged, but it's celebrated in our culture. And that, in terms of from a psychological and relational standpoint, leads to burnout and leads to turmoil around goals and values. Some people have a notion about wealth being associated with greed, and some people feel like certain people with certain wealth are not to be trusted, or maybe they're overcompensating. But there's also a guilt associated with some people of affluence, right? There's a lot of assumptions around, should someone that has accumulated a certain amount of wealth or stability even be ashamed of that, right? So the sense of shame is not only associated with poverty, but also sometimes assumed as it relates to someone on the higher income scale as well. Money is also point blank a taboo subject in our society. And just like sex and politics, people don't want to talk about money and can definitely fight and have disagreements around money. And so oftentimes the subject of finances is avoided. People think it's rude. People think it's inappropriate to bring up. And so certainly something to consider as well. Gender associations with money are also culturally relevant to point out. Stereotypically, males are supposed to be the providers, and sometimes women are assumed to be the ones who overspend or who are financially ignorant or dependent. There are also gender wage gaps that are a reality in our society. There's shame around female ambition and what it means when a woman seeks to sustain or attain a certain amount of wealth and success versus a man. And then also the pressure that men feel if they are under the notion in terms of providing for the family and earning at all costs. There are also generalizations related to race and ethnicity and certain meanings associated with assumptions around who tends to be rich, who tends to be frugal, and who tends to spend frivolously, right? So it is important from a psychological standpoint to honor some of these spoken and unspoken messages around money and finances. So feelings, let's talk about feelings and finances. There's a wide variety of feelings, and many of them I've spoken on already. We talked about the shame and guilt associated with financial situations. We've talked about the fear and anxiety and the insecurity about income and money. We also need to acknowledge the feeling of jealousy or resentment around money, the feeling of greed. But also, let's honor the positive emotions. We really don't like to say that there are good emotions and bad emotions, but some of the unspoken feelings related to finances that have less of a stigma. A lot of people take pride, have a sense of pride and joy around what they have accumulated or how they have responsibly maintained what they've earned. A sense of gratitude, either about being to provide for their family or being able to give back, and that relates to generosity, and a sense of contentment and a sense of faith, even for some, around not worrying or getting bent out of shape, if you will, about money and income, regardless of what the account balance shows. So let's have a mindful moment. We've talked about some of the early experiences and past relationships and how that influences your money mindset. Let's talk about something that needs to be erased and re-record. So pause for a second and really identify a money mantra or message that you want to unlearn. And now think about what difference that makes for your mental health, what difference and impact that can have on your relationships. Segueing to money personalities and behaviors. So let's get creative again, and I'm going to ask you a question. What would you do if you stumbled upon an unexpected lump sum of money? I don't know, maybe it was a gig you weren't expecting, maybe it was an inheritance, maybe you hit the lottery, whatever the source may be. Let's say you come across an unexpected large lump sum of money. What would you do? Would you go on a shopping spree? Would you take off work and schedule a trip? Would you pay off some debt? Would you give to your favorite charity or your church if that's something that you participate in, or you donate to your favorite political candidate or cause? Would you put it in savings? Would you invest? Now, think about what that says about the financial aspect of your personality. Now think about the impact that decision would have on your mental health and on your relationships. And so putting all these things together is very important, not only in general, but let's segue and talk about some specific nuances in the music industry. There are so many variables that are unique to certain types of professionals in this industry. The music industry comes with irregular or unpredictable income. It includes sometimes people who trust others to take care of it, right? So sometimes there's a sense of financial ignorance or not having to worry about it because so-and-so is taking care of that, managing that for me. You have to think about specific things like how royalties and splits impact how much you're getting paid. And then you have to think about culturally relevant things related to aspects like streaming. You have to think about unique taxes that are important to take care of. And you have to think about recoupment, right? Recoupment for things like equipment, studio time, tour expenses, marketing and promotions, merchandise, travel and experiences. So oftentimes the feelings and the stress and anxiety about money cannot be just relieved by the check, right? Or the deposit, but we have to think about the deductions. We have to think about the people and the nuances around what impacts that bottom line. So let's talk about money habits. And I phrase them in the sense of do's and don'ts. You want to diversify your income. Again, related to the survey results and the notion that income is unpredictable in this environment, right? In this context, you want to find other sources and ways to diversify your income. And there are financial professionals that can help you explore those options. From a psychological standpoint, diversifying your income is about having the wherewithal and the confidence and the focus and the attention and the foresight to plan accordingly. That also relates to behaviors and kind of responsibility around paying your bills and reducing debt, budgeting and tracking, building and maintaining good credit, saving and investing, giving back to the community if altruism is something that is important to you, and wealth building and estate planning, which is something that many people don't do, not only in this industry, but in general. In the same way that athletes need to protect their assets and plan ahead because their time playing does not last forever, music industry professionals, whether you're a performing artist or non-performing artist, need to think about long-term vision and planning. So what are some of the don'ts? Don't be complacent, right? Don't take for granted that somebody else is managing your finances and it's not a huge deal and all you need to worry about is creating, right? Or managing if you're behind the scenes. Another aspect that I'll bring up is that in this industry, in terms of vocational stereotypes, if you will, from a cultural, contextual standpoint, some people assume that the artist or the staff shouldn't be worried about money, right? Just do it because of your love for the craft, right? And so you have to think about how that informs financial behaviors as well. So making sure that there is an emphasis and intentionality around financial planning is important. Don't overspend. Don't live outside of your means. Related to that, don't make financial decisions as an attempt to impress others. Don't miss your due dates for your bills and accrue unnecessary debt or interest. Don't neglect insurance. It was identified earlier that health insurance and medical necessities are omitted or ignored as a result of financial instability. Do what you need to do to properly secure medical insurance and to save. And this is huge in the therapy world, unfortunately. Financial infidelity, what is that? That is basically not being honest in your relationships as it relates to money and money management. Very important. And so that happens not only on the romantic side, if you want to phrase it in terms of infidelity, but financial mishaps and abuse also happen on the personal side in terms of if another professional is managing your money and you're not aware. For couples and families, and of course, being a marriage and family therapist, the relational aspects, whether personal or professional, is very important for me to point out. In your relationship with your romantic partners and family, you want to build a sense of emotional intimacy, not only in general, but also as it relates to talking about finances, right? If you know that you get anxious or avoidant related to talking about money, you have to be sensitive to when your partner or another family member brings it up so that you're operating not from a place of being reactive, but responsive to the very necessary goal of planning ahead. Self-awareness about psychology of money improves not only sound decision-making, but the health and wellness of a relationship. And this probably goes without saying, financial stress is huge in terms of marital dissatisfaction and family conflict. So you want to make sure that your relationship is one built on trust and respect and transparency. Again, figuring out what needs to take place to feel comfortable having open communication about money, and building emotional intelligence and mindfulness around money discussions, and balancing that with confidence and resources. Normalizing, related to the industry, even normalizing during slow seasons, right? We know the industry can be seasonal. There are really peak times when things are back to back and really busy, and there are slow seasons. So how can you have conversations in your families around planning for that? Related to that is goal setting and boundaries. 3 S's that I like to refer to in relationships that couples and families should talk about. How and where do we store our money? How and where and when do we spend our money? And how do we save our money, right? And so again, financial literacy is important, information, financial integrity is important, financial intimacy, right? We think about emotional intimacy, but we don't think about financial intimacy, right? The comfort level and the sense of awareness that you have around talking about money, and recognizing how the psychology from your childhood and past experiences and your personality impacts your mindset, your behaviors. And who's on your financial team? Who do you have in your corner from a professional standpoint? Another thing that happens sometimes in couples and families related to music industry professionals is tension around the irregular income. And I've heard stories from people, kind of on the one hand, you're praising the starving artist who's doing something that they love, or the dedicated crew member. But then on the other hand, some people are faced with the burden and the shame and the critique of family members telling them to, quote unquote, get a real job, get a stable job, do something else. And yes, the reality is some people choose to or are forced to supplement their income in other ways. But when there is tension and shame and critique around that, then it can also not only impact your mental health, but your relationships as well. And so the guilt around that, right? The tension. And so negotiating and addressing these issues from a strong relationship standpoint is key. So let's talk about best practices, right? I like to come up sometimes with these little acrostics or like kind of cool ways to summarize what is important. What are the take homes, right? So I ride beats, right? Insure yourself and your family. That's the I. Read your contracts. I, invest. D, diversify. E, eliminate debt. B, budget. E, educate yourself. A, ask questions. A sense of curiosity and resourcefulness goes a long way. T, track your earnings, right? So not only have and create a budget, but operate according to the budget. Track your earnings and your expenses. And the S is save. Now let's come up with something CMA style, right? So we all know Nashville, right? How can Nashville remind us of financial principles, right? Negotiate contracts if possible. From a psychological standpoint, the anxiety and the confidence is all connected to that, right? A, awareness. Awareness of your feelings and finances. Awareness of how early childhood experiences and past relationships impact your orientation to money, your comfort level around money. The S is for save. The H is for health insurance. V, varied income sources, or in other words, diversify. I, invest. It is important to put something away for those slow seasons that we talked about. Ledger is related to budgeting and tracking, so keeping a ledger of your incomes and expenses, your profits and your loss. Learn from professionals. Learn from each other. Feel comfortable being vulnerable because there is a benefit of gaining information and support. And then the E is eliminating debt. So reflection questions and takeaways a little bit further. Let's recap some things that we have discussed and give you some action items. How can you identify how your values and experiences impact your money, mindset, feelings, and decisions? What financial traumas need to be acknowledged, addressed, and healed? The ones involving guilt, shame, abuse, neglect, fear, anger, even. And what financial behaviors exist as a result of this trauma? Again, remembering those attachment styles and how they manifest. Do you have a secure orientation? Are you more anxious or avoidant? And do you understand how your behaviors connect to your mindset and your feelings? What is one financial healthy habit that you will practice? Maybe you're really good about paying your bills on time, but you've never thought about saving or investment. Maybe you have a manager or agent, but you don't have a financial planner, right? Maybe you're really good with tracking and buying affordable equipment or budgeting properly, but you're not, again, saving for a rainy day or thinking about how much interest your bank account, accrues. What kind of financial literacy and professional support do you need, right? So your agent, your wealth advisor, or your business manager, your accountant, do you have a tax attorney? Do you need a therapist, right? Or a counselor? Has the psychology of money topic brought about a sense of awareness that you have some things from your childhood and your past experiences that need to be addressed? It's not only about how can I develop the technical skills to build wealth and to manage my money responsibly, but how can I acknowledge what's really going on with me on a deep level, internally, psychologically, and how it manifests in my relationships with my family, with my romantic partners, with my friends, and with my colleagues and business partners. And then last but not least, what are you striving to be rich in that has nothing to do with money? How can you be rich in knowledge and information? How can you be rich in support? How can you be rich in patience and mindfulness around giving yourself the grace and the time to really understand the impact of how these factors intertwine? So in closing, I want to leave you with this. Understanding the psychology of money is essential not only because it shapes our beliefs, behaviors, and relationships, but also because it plays a vital role in building wealth and enhancing our overall well-being. And I'll also leave you with a few quotes from some popular people in our society. One of my favorite quotes from Susie Orman is, "Stop buying things you don't need to impress people that you don't even like." One of my favorite quotes from Rick Warren on this subject is, "Don't let your net worth determine your self-worth. And remember that money management is a spiritual discipline." Thank you very much. And I'm happy to take any questions and share resources.